As a seasoned religious leader, I am taken aback and greatly concerned by the presentation and the use of God in the public square. The media give a false narrative that either one is a theist, one who believes in a self-conscious God who intervenes in the world, or one is an atheist, one who believes that there is no God. There is a third idea. It's called non-theism or non-theistic God beliefs. And these are not an alternative, but these are a significant part of the history of the United States, and they are significant in our world today. Non-theism, for the sake of definition at the moment, is any belief that is not a self-conscious entity that also intervenes in the world. The founders of our nation, many of them were proud of their non-theist beliefs, including George Washington, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and later, Abraham Lincoln. Now, the landscape today is a little different. A 2010 Gallup poll determined that 9 out of 10 Americans believe in God. A survey by the Pew Research Center determined that of those people who believe in God, up to 75% of them, that's 200 million people possibly, do not believe in a theist God. Nonetheless, when I look out in the public square for non-theist believers, I find only silence. Why? Well, let us take the common case today of the politician who ends his stump speech with "God bless America." Now, "God bless America" is an explicit theistic statement of a God who's going to listen to prayer and will intervene in the world on behalf of the country. But that's not the real issue. "God bless America" is actually two ideas that are bound together as if they are one. The first is a theistic God, and the second is loyalty to one's country, as if to say that if you do not believe in this theistic God, your loyalty to this country might be questioned. Now, that's utter nonsense. Nonetheless, when the politician declares, "God bless America," many non-theist believers are intimidated into silence. And the attacks come from the other side as well, from atheists such as Richard Dawkins in his writings. And his premise is anyone who believes in God is either weak of mind or blinded by religious dogma. Now, non-theist believers are non-dogmatic, but they're still in this impossible position of having to prove that they're not weak of mind. Now, this is actually an ancient conundrum being caught between atheism and theism. In the back of the Hebrew Bible, that's the Old Testament, there is a slim volume called Ecclesiastes. The author of the text goes by the title Kohelet to hide his name and his position. And he makes a remarkable statement. He says, "I believe in God." Now, what's remarkable about that statement is that at least 4 times the book of Ecclesiastes disproves a theistic God. Or at the very least, it proves that you cannot prove there is a theistic God, which makes Kohelet the most prominent non-theistic believer in the entire Bible. Actually, probably the only one. Nonetheless, he believes in God. Ecclesiastes is relevant today because we can use the methodology that Kohelet used to examine our God beliefs that we would use today. And his methodology was observation and reasoning. So consider the following observation. Remember when you were 5 years old. Is the God you believed in when you were 5 years old the same God you believed in when you were 18 years old? Of course not. And the God you seek when you are 30 years old is not the God you seek when you are 50. And it's certainly not the God that people seek when they are 80-year-old. In fact, the God you believe in today is probably not the God that you will believe in 5 years. Life happens and beliefs change. However, when atheists and theists debate God, God to them is unchangeable. They talk about God as one thing and one thing only. When non-theists talk about God, they talk about the possibilities of what God may be. Now, I had my first non-theist moment when I was a rabbinic student doing a summer internship in clinical pastoral education. That's hospital chaplaincy. And I was at a Catholic hospital in rural Kentucky under the supervision of the well-respected but formidable Sister Barbara. That day, Sister Barbara had us sitting around a table, and she handed out blank pieces of paper. And she said to us, "I want you to draw your belief in God." Whew. Now, I am a Jew, and rule number 2 for Jews since revelation at Mount Sinai, as recorded in the book of Exodus, that's the 10 Commandments, is Jews do not draw pictures of their God. But Sister Barbara was insistent, and now she was annoyed with me. I hastily drew a picture of a piece of rope. Confused my classmates. I said, "Hold a piece of rope in your hand and it feels solid, but look at it. That rope is made up of braids of smaller ropes. And those smaller ropes are made up of braids of large strings. And the large strings, braids of small strings. And large threads and small threads. And we can reduce this all the way down till we have to pull out the microscope. And we can see even at that minute level, the braids are made out of ever smaller braids." That, I said, is my conception of God. Now, my idea is actually based on the writings of a 20th century theologian by the name of Martin Buber. And he wrote a text called I and Thou. And in one brief paragraph in that book, Martin Buber describes his acquisition of an idea of what is God. He said, "I contemplate a tree. And he can see the sucking roots, and he can see the breathing leaves. He can comprehend all of the processes that make that tree alive. That's the biology, the chemistry, and the physics. And he can also comprehend all of the ideas of aliveness of that tree." But Buber cautions at that moment. He says, it's not something temporary like mood or disposition or imagination. Buber sees a tree and he sees God. He looks with a full idea of what is reality, and reality for him includes God. Now, when theists and atheists debate God, they're not talking about Martin Buber and his tree. They are when Richard Dawkins and the late Christopher Hitchens write their text today attacking theism. They're only talking about a theistic God. And their theses do work. They do disprove God. But that's low-hanging fruit because Kohelet already proved that you can disprove theistic God 2,000 years ago. What these texts do not do, what their flaw in the text is, these texts do not address non-theistic God beliefs. Why not? Well, the short answer is non-theistic God beliefs are a moving target in 2 fundamental ways. The first way, what do non-theists believe? Well, God could be all consciousness. Or maybe God is the spark of aliveness that animates all living things. Maybe God is the vibration of strings in string theory. Or maybe God is the force in Star Wars. Maybe God is the universe. Or maybe God is the universe and beyond which human beings can't understand. Or maybe God is none of those things because God cannot be anything actual. Because anything actual is by definition finite. So God must be pure potential from which all actual things come. Still with me? The second way is that non-theistic God beliefs are individual. If I were to get a phone call that my wife is being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance and it's an emergency, I will be praying to a God I probably don't believe in that will intervene in this world and save my wife. And the God I pray to when my kid is at bat or my kid is lining up to take a shot on goal is not the God I pray to when I am stuck in traffic and late to an appointment. Our God beliefs bounce all over the place. And this is not a weakness, but this is a demonstration of the potency of non-theistic God beliefs, that in almost any given human circumstance, there you can find a God belief. Now, there's one other critical point I need to make between theism and non-theism. When a non-theist believer wants to test their idea of God, they take it and they throw it against reality. If it sticks, good. And if it doesn't, it's discarded and the search begins again. For a theist, however, they have a set idea of what God is. And when reality crashes into it, if the reality doesn't mesh, the reality is tossed aside. Now, when I try to explain this point to my students, they often don't quite get it. So I also use, to explain it, an unrelated song written by the late Harry Chapin. And this song is about a strict teacher and her young student who is given the task of having to color a flower. And the teacher says to the young student, "Flowers are red, young man, green leaves are green. There's no need to see them any other way than the way they've always been seen." To which the young student replies, "There's so many colors in the rainbow, so many colors in the morning sun, so many colors in the flower, and I see every one." Non-theistic God beliefs are as broad and as colorful as the critical and creative apparatuses of the human mind. However, non-theistic God beliefs can also be vague and uncertain. This is not a flaw, but this is a demonstration of just how human these God beliefs are. Because human beings are often vague, and certainly we find ourselves often uncertain. Now, I bring this contrast and comparison of atheism and theism on one side and non-theistic God beliefs on the other, really to make one critical point. Non-theistic God beliefs have been and still are the vital glue that holds together the public square. This truly is God in the public square. I would go so far as to argue that non-theistic God beliefs are the foundation of the public square. Remember, non-theistic God beliefs are as ancient as the Hebrew Bible. Only they embrace science and knowledge wherever it may lead. They're anti-dogmatic. They embrace art and culture and education, both religious and secular. And they're not subject to mood or disposition or imagination. But more to the point, at 200 million possible believers in the United States, non-theistic God beliefs represent one of the largest constituencies in the United States. And as such, it's this group that provides the platform in the public square, so that all people in the public square, no matter how shrill or extreme, they can find that place and they can collaborate, cooperate, and if so moved, create resolution. The issue in the public square is not the cacophony coming from the extremes. My concern is the silence in the middle. Washington, Madison, Jefferson, and Lincoln demonstrated that non-theistic God beliefs can be used to great effect to build this country. And others too, as varied as Mark Twain and Albert Einstein. Non-theistic God beliefs, since the founding of this country, have been the American way. And today, they still are the American way.